Violence is a key piece of many works, whether it be in movies, books, or literature. It catches our attention because of how jarring it is, but it usually has deeper implications. In the words of Thomas C. Foster, we sense a greater weight or depth in works when there is something happening beyond the surface. Violence can mean many different things, and it can be literal or symbolic, as seen in Life of Pi.
Even in the very beginning of The Life of Pi, the author introduces violence to the main character through the vivid scene of a Bengal tiger mauling a live goat. In the story, Bassine's father does this in order to show his boys how dangerous animals are, yet this action has larger implications, including the representation of parental love and warnings for one's children. In the story, Pi's father would use the intimate action of violence, as Foster writes, in order to show how much he loves his boys. So much so that he would scare them out of doing something stupid like putting their arms into a tiger cage by forcing them to watch the demise of a goat. Not only does this violent action symbolize the love of parents, but it also acts as irony and foreshadowing. After being told not to mess with the animals because they are dangerous, Pi's brother says, in order to frighten him, that he will be the next goat, which is foreshadowing to later on in the story where he really almost was a goat to be mauled. This is also ironic because Pi is stranded on a boat with animals, which is precisely what his father told him not to do.
Most of the violence in Life of Pi fits under Foster's second definition of violence, which is authorial violence, because the death and suffering the author introduces to Life of Pi is in the interest of plot advancement or thematic development, in which the author, not his character Pi, are responsible. For example, Pi loses his family in a ship crash. This serves to throw him into independence and adulthood at a very young age because he has to learn how to fend for himself. And when on the lifeboat that he is thrown onto subsequently, Pi witnesses the zebra and orangutan, animals that he grows up with, savagely attacked by a hyena. Witnessing this first real act of violence strips Pi of his innocence and kickstarts the struggle he faces throughout the book of choosing survival or his morals and figuring out how to balance the two. This event is the beginning of Pi making choices that bring him closer and closer to rock bottom spiritually. And this isn't the first time violence has been used to develop characters and advance a plot. Spider-Man is a similar example. The loss of Spider-Man's Uncle Ben motivates him to catch criminals and take on the full responsibility of his powers. This loss motivates him to take action, and the same could be said for Batman. As a child, he witnesses his mother and father killed in front of him by a common street criminal, and it makes him swear to fight crime as an adult and basically be a vigilante.
After several days out at sea alone, Pi catches his first fish. This fish can be interpreted as a representation of his former self, a vegetarian, that is silently broken within the folds of a dark blanket of uncertainty and survival. This first violent action that Pi takes shows the beginnings of his transformation from a scared, almost helpless boy into someone who will do anything to survive. After he kills the fish, he weeps, for it was the first death on his hands. He says that he is as guilty as Cain, and that the fish was never left out of his prayers. Similarly, when Richard Parker eats the blind man as he attacks Pi, the action represents Pi's loss of his former self. He has now reached the lowest of lows, meaning he will stand by and feel little shame in the demise of another human. This violence, along with his tasting of the other sailor and the killing of the fish, belong in what Foster calls the first category of violence, the kind that one does to another person, or in this case a fish. This violence is not only symbolic, but has a more personal meaning than that of a plot advancement violence.
It is established at the end of the book that Richard Parker is an extension of Pi, and that Pi was at one of his lowest points when he reached the island. He had just transitioned from a vegetarian to a meat eater to a cannibal, who it is implied may have killed somebody. When Pi and Richard Parker reach the carnivorous island, Richard Parker starts killing meerkats more for fun than for his appetite. He is described as moving through them, blazing a trail of murder and mayhem, and it is also said that he killed meerkats that he did not eat. As Thomas Foster stated, it's nearly impossible to generalize about the meanings of violence except that there are typically more than one, But this unnecessary savageness seems to represent Pi reaching the lowest of lows and him feeling less than human after the act that he had just committed. If Richard Parker was just a reflection of Pi himself, then this represents the time when Pi became the most animalistic and less than human version of himself.